What's up, everybody? I'm Luke Duncan, and welcome back to the Traveling Circus. And I've been slacking, to say the least. The content has been slacking. I spent most of the summer without a boat, and now we're kind of getting back into the swing of things here. So the Baitworks Bait of the Week have been, lacking, to say the very least. But I had an idea. I live a very fortunate life through the podcast. I get to meet a lot of very cool people, very talented anglers that tell their stories week in, week out on Low Budget Live. So this idea came to me while I was out fishing, trying to do a Baitworks Bait of the Week, going out there and trying to break down a technique for you guys. And I thought, I know I have a contact list that I'm very proud of. I've got the goods most of the time on how a lot of these guys win these major events. And so while I was out filming, Brad Knight called. Forrest Wood Cup champ Brad Knight, really good friend of mine. And I was actually using a technique that he utilized to change his life. Won $500,000 in the Forrest Wood Cup back in 2015. I was doing a video on this technique and it hit me. So why not? I'm going to break down the technique. I'm going to show you how I use it, the setups that I like, and every technique in this series that we're going to do. But we're also going to hear from the horse's mouth. We're going to hear from the people that have utilized these techniques to win major cash, major titles, major trophies out there on the professional trail. So this is the Baitworks, Don't Just Take My Word For It series. There we go. Chunk. Uh-oh. Weird. Come out of there. A bad fish. He's tangled up. Got him out. There we go. It's for patience, man. Light line. You just gotta hold on and see how it plays out. There we go, little guy. Skin hooked. It's all up in that tree. Of course, this video brought to you by baitworks.com, just like all of the Baitworks Bait of the Week videos that we've done this year. You can go to bait-works.com and save you some cash by using code Duncan-10. Let them know that you're a low lifer. Let them know that you like the Traveling Circus. I appreciate it. And if you're not subscribed, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Now let's jump in to the nuts and bolts. So the technique we're going to talk about today is a technique that I feel like a lot of people overlook, myself included. And on the day I kind of came up with the idea for this series, I was actually out on a shallow lake trying to get better with this technique. I drop shot a ton out deep, whether it's ledge fishing for largemouth that are very pressured, dropping straight down on fish when they're suspended, catching big smallmouth up north, catching spotted bass. I love a drop shot. I've loved it for 20 years. It's something that I adopted a very long time ago, and I feel like I've got a lot of confidence in it. But what we're going to talk about today is a different application for this technique, and that is shallow water power fishing with a drop shot. And it's basically the same setup, right? Spinning rod, braided line to fluorocarbon, but you're making short pitches to isolated cover, to brush piles 6 feet or less, things like that. I mean, rock, whatever, but shallow water, you can pitch it around docks as well. But it is an amazing technique in that late summer, early fall transition period where fish are just funky, man. They've been beat on a lot. They've seen a lot of jigs, a lot of creature baits and things like that. So it's something I've really not messed with a ton over the years. And the day I was on the water messing with this, Brad Knight calls me, "What's up? How are you? What's going on?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm using the Brad Knight." So he won $500,000 on this technique several years ago, 2015. And my buddy Justin Atkins that fishes the Elite Series always says, when you win a big tournament, that technique is forever known as your name followed by that bait, right? So this is the Brad Knight. It's the Brad Knight drop shot forever to me, and rightfully so. For me, the setup on this that I used, I've been playing around with some new rods this year, several different kinds. I'm a free agent and I like that. So all of them I get through Baitworks, but actually Denali Rods sent me this. They sell these through Baitworks. This is a Denali N3 series, really affordable rod. It's got wind grip on it. It's man, I really like this rod. Multi-purpose is what they call it, but this is a 7-foot medium action. And it's probably, for me, if I'm open water drop shot fishing for smallmouth, they're gonna make crazy runs. It's a little, with like 6-pound line, it's a stout rod. It's got a great tip on it, but, and you can see it right there, great tip, but it also has some backbone to it for pulling largemouth out of the cover when I'm utilizing this shallow water drop shot, okay? So let's talk real quick why you go to this setup. A lot of times when you're using a pitch bait, whether that's, like I said, jig, creature bait, beaver, whatever, the bottom composition is really mucky, silted in a lot of these areas this time of year. And what this is gonna do when that laser sharp, that drop shot weight lands, it's just gonna put the bait right above that silt line, depending on your leader length. And you're gonna go 10, 8, 10, 12 inches, depending on water clarity, depending on the water depth as well. But you can see right there, you're a bass, you're the viewer, look at that. And you're gonna shake that thing right in his face, and it's just gonna stand out there and dance. He's gonna bite that over something that comes flying past his head and gets lost in the mud every single time. So this is just, again, you can use it in the spring as well, but I really, I think that this is a weapon this time of year when fish are really beat up around all types of shallow cover, okay? So I'm throwing 10-pound braid to, in this video, some of the fish I call 8-pound fluoro. If I was around bigger fish, this lake I was fishing doesn't have a lot of big fish in it. If I was around bigger fish, I'd probably go to 10, maybe 12 even, if you can get away with it and still get bites. And I know people are like, 12-pound line, I would flip 20 or 25 around these trees. Well, I think the lighter you can get away with, the more bites you're gonna get. That's just my opinion. I think it makes the worm act right, look more lifelike. But I'm using, on this setup, a Trocar finesse worm hook. It's got a really good keeper right there. Trocar hook point that we all love, that just gets them. I mean, sticks them in a one-off, but you can see that's weedless. That's gonna be a different setup than what I utilize for, say, offshore drop shot fishing, when I'm gonna nose hook a little drop shot hook more times than not right in the nose of a Berkeley flatworm or some style bait like that. Even when I fish spotted bass, I'm using a robo worm a lot like this. I nose hook it as well. And it seems like you get a lot more bites when you're fishing offshore like that, in my opinion. But around brush, even if it's offshore, this Trocar one-aught finesse worm hook gets them in the boat, keeps you from staying hung up in brush. So let's talk baits now. For me, I'm a robo worm fanatic. I have been ever since Aaron Martin's put it in Bassmaster magazine that it was cool a long time ago, okay? So robo worm, this is Morning Dawn. I don't know why they like the little pink worm, but they do. I don't care whether it's offshore, whether it's spotted bass, whether it's largemouth, whatever the case, whether it's what we're talking about today in this shallow water technique, right? It is absolutely a deadly color. But there are lots of great robo worm colors, like Aaron's Magic, the more subtle green pumpkin colors. Maybe you don't get bit on this. You can go through a rotation of those. They've got other great colors. Margarita Mutilator with a little purple in it. Depends on where you're at in the country. I know fish get color funky sometimes, right? But this is always, okay? Always, say it with me, always my go-to first. I'm always gonna pick, I've got so many bags of these bad boys in the boat right there all the time. 6-inch robo. You can go with the fat robo sometimes. If you want a little bigger profile, you can go with the 4-inch little robo worm. Something else I'll utilize a lot too, a zoom trick worm. Zoom trick worm on this rig, deadly. I throw a black, I throw a green pumpkin in that a lot of the times, depending on water clarity, time of year, things like that. But something in that 6-inch range, I feel like is a really good profile for this technique. But if you haven't tried it, get out there and try it. But like I said at the first of this video, why take my word for it? Here's Forrest Wood Cup champ Brad Knight to tell you exactly how this changed his life, and you should use it a lot more than you do.
Hey everybody, we're talking about drop shots, and whenever drop shotting is talked about, you're instantly taking your mind to thinking about clear water, smallmouth or spotted bass, but specifically deep water. Well, I want to talk about a tactic with a drop shot that's not necessarily the conventional way to do it. So we're going to be taking a conventional bait and putting it in unconventional places. And back in 2015, I used this exact setup to change my life forever whenever I won the 2015 Forrest Wood Cup. So the way that I did it is I was fishing way back in a creek, and we're in the time period now where you're in that August to September time frame, and it's really one of the toughest periods in my opinion to catch fish, specifically in the southeast. Water's hot, fish have been pressured all season long, and you're just looking for a way to get bites. Well, this is going to be one of the best ways that I know how to get it done. And what I like to do, it's really what I call 50-50 time. So you can spend your time out deep and then kind of have just about as good a chance to win shallow. So you got to kind of pick your poison and fish your strengths. And I like to target fish. So in this tournament specifically, this is a tactic that I've used throughout my entire tournament fishing career, is I like to go up in a creek as far as I can go and look for more of oxygenated water that's often overlooked in pressured fisheries. So I was on the back of a really expansive flat that had a lot of silted in mud or muck on the bottom, and coincidentally enough, in this particular event there had been a tornado pass through and throw lots of trees over this big mud flat, and you're like 2.5 to maybe 3 feet deep. Well, the problem with that is you have this much or so of silt on the bottom, and we've all been there, right, where you're trolling back in a creek and you look behind you and you see this big dust cloud, or every time you hit your trolling motor prop it's blowing clouds of dust everywhere. Well, that's kind of the same thing that happens when your bait hits the water. So if you can envision your bait falling and it hitting the water, and there's a fish beside a stump, as it follows your bait down, all of a sudden your bait disappears. Or it's just laying on top of that mud. And when fish bite these lures, they're not actually putting their teeth or their mouth on it and picking the bait up. They vacuum that bait up off the bottom. And in my opinion, I don't like to use a bottom bait in that situation. And I feel like if I can get my bait out of the silt, it does one of two things. It helps me keep the bait in the strike zone right in their face a little longer, but also feel like it gets a lot more bites because they can not have to suck that silt up into their mouth whenever they get it, and the bait's present all the time. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch there. And that's the technique that I won the cup with. And things like Old Hickory places that I've used this, the silty places, far back in a creek where you have trees, boat docks, it's totally limitless on where you're going to throw this thing. And that's one of the key things about a drop shot is, again, we go from deep water to all the way back in a creek in 2 or 3 feet of water where it's completely dirty. And I like to keep my leader pretty short in this situation when I'm fishing it shallow, maybe 10, 12 inches. And you're just kind of basically pitching it along just like you would with a beaver or a jig or wherever you're going to flip to cover. And again, whenever this thing falls, it's going to fall down. The weight hits the bottom, stays in the silt, but the bait stays up in their face, and it gets you bit in places and times where a conventional lure pitching or flipping, or a crankbait maybe per se, won't get the bite. So you're able to fish slower, more methodical, and still be able to finesse fish and get bites in tough situations. And it's not just for the fall, it'll work anytime, specifically spring when fish are shallow on cover again in the spawn. Another great technique. So spring, summer, fall, get you a drop shot, get you a 10-inch, 12-inch leader. I like to throw 8 to 10 pound fluorocarbon because I'm throwing it around cover. So I want to make sure I beef my line up just a little bit. We're talking weights. You can range anything from 1/8 ounce up to maybe 1/4. I don't want to throw anything heavier than that in the shallower water. I like a 1/0 worm hook. I tie a polymer knot and just your regular Texas rig worm hook on here. So there you go, that's the setup. Hope it helps you catch more fish. There you go.
All right, that's all she wrote for the first ever Bait Works. Don't just take my word for it series. We're gonna go out, we're gonna use some of these tournament winning techniques. We're gonna interview the guys that won big money on them. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Thank y'all for tuning in. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see y'all next time.